The bank lobby was buzzing with the usual noise of hurried customers, clicking heels on the marble floor, and the dull hum of computers printing receipts. At the corner of the room, a man stepped in quietly. His clothes were worn, the kind of faded jacket and scuffed shoes that made him look invisible in a place of polished suits and shiny ties. His eyes were calm, yet there was something unsettling about the way he walked, slow, deliberate, as if he had seen countless days tougher than this one. When he approached the counter, the young teller raised her eyebrows. She gave him the kind of look that strips away dignity before a word is even spoken. Behind her, a manager noticed the man's hesitation and smirked. To everyone around, he looked like someone who barely belonged in a bank, someone who probably had nothing. The whispers began, little chuckles, sideways glances, and a few mocking smiles. No one imagined the truth hidden behind his modest appearance. "Do you even have an account here?" the manager asked, his voice dripping with arrogance. He didn't speak loudly, but loud enough for nearby customers to turn their heads. The man nodded, gently sliding an old bank card across the counter. His hands were rough, marked by years of hard work, the kind of hands that told a story louder than words. The teller took the card reluctantly, almost disgusted to touch it. She whispered something to the manager, who laughed. "Well, if there's any balance at all, I'll double it for you right now," he mocked, his words sharp as knives. The people waiting in line laughed nervously, some covering their mouths, others not even bothering. The man didn't flinch. He simply stood there, his eyes steady, his silence cutting deeper than any reply. That silence unsettled the manager more than he realized. The crowd inside the bank began to stir. One woman leaned toward another, whispering, "Why would he even come here dressed like that? He should know better." Another customer, a young man in a business suit, smirked and pulled out his phone, as if waiting to capture a moment worth mocking online. Yet not everyone laughed. A child, sitting beside his mother, stared at the man curiously. Children have a way of seeing past appearances, and for a brief moment, the child's innocent gaze seemed to recognize something no one else could. The man noticed and gave a small, almost invisible smile to the boy, an acknowledgement that not all eyes were blind, but the mocking laughter grew louder, echoing through the marble hall. Every chuckle was a weight added to the scene, making the injustice heavier, sharper, almost unbearable to watch. The man adjusted his posture, standing taller, though still quiet. His silence was not weakness. It was the silence of someone who knew more than anyone else in the room. He looked around slowly, letting his gaze sweep across the walls, the lights, the very structure of the bank. For a second, his eyes seemed to say, "If only you knew." The manager, emboldened by the laughter around him, leaned forward. "People like you waste our time," he sneered. "This bank is for serious clients, not for beggars pretending to have accounts." The words cut through the air like broken glass. Gasps followed, but still the man didn't react. Instead, he gently tapped the counter with his knuckles, a small rhythmic sound that made the room fall oddly silent. The teller, nervous now, hesitated before typing the man's details into her computer. Her fingers trembled slightly. Something in his calm presence unsettled her. The screen loaded slowly, too slowly, as if dragging the moment toward an inevitable revelation. The manager rolled his eyes. "This is a waste of time," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Check quickly so we can send him out." The man's eyes, however, remained fixed on the monitor, not with desperation but with certainty. His stillness was almost defiant, a quiet storm waiting to be unleashed. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the truth was about to speak louder than any insult. The manager leaned on the counter as if it belonged to him personally. "Tell you what," he said, voice smooth with cruelty. "If your balance isn't zero, I'll double it." Laughter flickered across the room like sparks. A security guard smirked from near the door. A woman in a neat grey blazer folded her arms, enjoying the spectacle. The teller glanced between the manager and the man, cheeks tightening with second-hand shame. The man didn't answer. He simply looked at the manager's nameplate and then at the polished floor, as if measuring how far arrogance could fall. His hands rested on the counter, rough knuckles tapping once. Calm, controlled, almost ceremonial. "Go on." The manager prodded the teller. "Let's waste no more time." She typed faster, swallowing. The line behind them grew longer, and impatience added weight to the air. Yet the man's stillness was an anchor, a quiet center that made every insult feel smaller than it sounded. He breathed in, slow. The building breathed with him, air vents humming, printers murmuring, the small machinery of a bank that thought it understood value. A boy in a school uniform tugged his mother's sleeve. "Why are they laughing?" he whispered. The mother didn't answer. She watched the man's face and saw something she couldn't name. Not pride, not anger, something steadier, something that made the manager's swagger look like borrowed confidence. "Any day now," the manager said, with a theatrical roll of his wrist. "We have real clients to serve." The man finally spoke, soft, steady. "You will," he nodded toward the monitor. "Very soon." The teller's screen refreshed, then paused on a flagged notice she had never seen before. A pale blue banner appeared over the account field, followed by a small, pulsing icon. She squinted, leaned closer. "That's strange," she murmured, mostly to herself. "What is it?" The manager asked, already annoyed. "An internal verification prompt," she said, confused. "I've never seen this one." "Click through," he snapped. "It's probably a glitch." The teller clicked. Another prompt appeared. This one requesting a secondary credential level, an override above her permission. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. "Sir, it wants a manager clearance," the manager smirked. At last, something useful to do. He reached over, typed his credentials with a flourish, then pressed enter as if signing a masterpiece. The system thought for a beat. Another banner rolled down. The words were short, clinical, and completely out of place in a crowded lobby. "Escalate to regional authorization." The manager's smile stalled. "That doesn't happen. Maybe the account is restricted," the teller offered, heart pounding. A nearby customer chuckled. "Restricted? For what? Having $5? The man watched the screen without blinking. "If the system is asking," he said quietly, "it's because it knows who owns what." "Owns what?" The manager barked, more rattled than he wanted to show. The man didn't answer. He simply stepped half an inch closer to the counter, the way one might step closer to a truth that would soon need no explanation. The manager grabbed the desk phone. "I'm calling regional," he declared loudly enough for the lobby to hear. "Let's get this over with." He dialed, impatient fingers drumming the wood. On speaker, a bright corporate tone preceded a calm voice. "Regional Authorization Desk. This is Dana." "Yes, Dana," the manager said, adopting his most professional cadence. "We have an account triggering an unusual escalation. Likely a system error. We need a bypass." "Read me the account stub," Dana replied. He recited the masked digits. Silence, then, "Sir, please step away from speakerphone." "For privacy. This is my branch," he countered, forcing a laugh. "We're handling a—" "For privacy," Dana repeated, colder this time. Something in her tone sliced clean through his posture. He lowered the volume, bent toward the handset. The lobby quieted. The man waited, hands still, eyes on nothing and everything at once. "Yes, I'm the branch manager," he said after a moment, all showmanship gone from his voice. "No, I haven't. I mean, how would I know? He looks like—" He stopped himself, catching the word before it escaped. "Fine, I'll check." He lifted his gaze, scanning the man with new uncertainty, as if seeing him for the first time and not liking what the details suggested. The calm, the patience, the refusal to be diminished. "Dana," he said into the phone. Swallowing, "What do you want me to do?" "Follow the on-screen protocol," she replied, "and do not deny any service. I repeat, do not deny service. Is this account special?" A longer silence. "Treat it as if the entire building depends on it." The manager's hand trembled just once, barely visible, but visible enough. Whispers turned into a hush. People in line sensed a current shifting under the floor, a tremor of meaning that hadn't revealed its shape yet. The security guard's smirk faded into a watchful frown. The woman in the grey blazer uncrossed her arms. Even the child leaned forward, eyes wide. The teller followed the protocol step by step. Each new screen required confirmations she'd only seen in training modules. Identity assurance tiers, service guarantees, a note about executive-sensitive handling. Her palms were damp. "Sir," she said to the man, voice soft, "could I please see a secondary ID?" He slid forward a worn leather wallet. Inside, the ID was simple. No theatrics, no attempt at grandeur. She studied it, eyes darting back to the screen, to the ID, to the man. Something aligned. She exhaled. "Thank you." The manager, caught between pride and fear, tried to recover authority. "Look," he told the lobby with a brittle smile, "sometimes important clients use security layers. Nothing to see here." But the words felt hollow, like tape over a cracked window. The man turned slightly as if to speak to the room without addressing anyone in particular. "You can measure a place," he said gently, "by how it treats the people who look like they can't answer back." No one laughed. Not anymore. The sentence hung in the air with the weight of something true enough to rearrange a day. The teller reached the final prompt. "Display accessible balance?" the system asked, and beneath it a line warning, "Certain holdings are masked by mandate. Display only liquid view." She clicked. Numbers populated the screen, quietly like a tide arriving without drama. It wasn't just that the balance was large, it was the architecture beneath it. Accounts nested within accounts, liquidity cascaded through instruments she'd only heard of in corporate memos. Then a final banner she'd never imagined she would see. "Do not disclose portfolio detail without executive liaison present." The manager's throat worked around a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. What is this?" he asked, too softly for arrogance to hide behind. The teller glanced at the man, then at the manager. "Sir," she whispered, "this is not a standard client." The man nodded once, grateful for her steadiness. "You said," he reminded the manager, voice even, "that if there was any balance, you'd double it." The lobby held its breath. Somewhere deep in the building, a vault door clanked, as if agreeing with the moment. The manager tried to smile. It came out as a grimace. We were joking." The man's eyes were kind, not triumphant. "Jokes reveal what we believe we can get away with." He let the words settle. "You don't have to double anything. You only have to remember today." The boy by the line squeezed his mother's hand. "Who is he?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "Someone," she said, voice trembling with a respect she didn't yet understand, "who doesn't need us to know." And for the first time since he'd walked in, the bank felt small around him, like a stage that the lobby's rhythm changed without anyone announcing it. Conversations dropped to murmurs. The manager stood straighter, the way people do when a storm passes too close and leaves the air charged. The man adjusted his sleeve, an absent movement humble, but it landed like a bell in a cathedral. People listened for what would ring next. A second manager drifted from a glass office, pretended to review a clipboard, then pretended not to stare. The security guard touched the radio on his shoulder and then thought better of it. In the back, a coffee machine hissed, loud in the new silence. "Sir," the teller said, recovering her training, "would you like to proceed with your request?" He nodded. "A simple balance confirmation," he said. "Printed," the manager swallowed. "We don't usually print for—" He stopped. "We can print." He stepped aside quickly, as if the counter might burn him. The printer chattered. The paper slid out, crisp, unarguable. The teller took it with both hands. She looked as if she were carrying a document that could change the angle of a building. She glanced at the man. He nodded again, inviting her to pass it. She did. The paper made the softest sound when it touched his palm, a whisper of facts. He folded it once, neatly, the way old habits teach dignity. He didn't show it to anyone. He didn't need to. The manager's face searched for a foothold, any place to climb back to authority, and found only the smooth wall of reality. From the line, a contractor in dusty boots cleared his throat. "Respect," he said quietly, to no one in particular. It wasn't praise. It was a correction. To the room, to himself, to all the times people confuse polish with worth. The man turned to the teller. "Thank you for your help," he said. "You've been professional." A flush rose to her cheeks that wasn't shame. It was relief. the kind that comes when a person realizes they're still allowed to choose decency, even when their boss chooses not to. The manager tried for civility. "If there is anything else our branch can do to—" "There will be," the man said, not unkindly. "But not today." He slid the folded paper back into his wallet. The small action made the bank look suddenly like what it was. A service, not a throne. The manager took a careful step closer. "Sir, I want to personally apologize for any misunderstanding. We value all our clients." The sentence was polished until it had no fingerprints, the kind of apology that lives in a manual. The man tilted his head. "Misunderstanding," he repeated as if tasting whether the word fit. "You understood exactly what you believed you could get away with." He said it softly, gifting the manager the chance to hear it as instruction rather than condemnation. A couple in business casual slipped out of line, uncomfortable with being witnesses. The contractor stayed. The woman in the grey blazer put her phone away. The child in the chair watched with the unwavering attention kids save for moments when grown-ups reveal who they really are. The manager's smile faltered. "We'll make this right." "How?" the man asked. Not hostile, curious. "Right is not a refund. Right is not a free coffee or a scripted apology. Right begins where contempt ends." He let the silence do work. Somewhere behind the counter a drawer closed too hard. A teller from another station peeked over, then ducked back, as if she were looking at an eclipse. "Train your people," the man continued. "Not to flatter upward, but to recognize dignity without a price tag." "Start there." The manager nodded too fast. Of course. He latched onto the first action that felt manageable. "We can comp any fees on your account today, and—" The man raised a hand gently. "Listen, money is easy. The habit of seeing is hard." He glanced at the line, then back at the manager. "You're in the business of value. Learn to see it where it doesn't announce itself." The words didn't sting. They settled. The manager looked smaller, not because he'd been humiliated, but because a truer measure had entered the room. The man turned again to the teller. "Would you mind placing a call for me?" he asked. "There's a liaison your system can reach." Her eyes widened slightly. "Yes, sir." She dialed a short internal code she'd never used. The line clicked. Someone answered quickly. The conversation was brief, courteous, precise. When she hung up, she stood a little taller, as if she'd just been trusted with a key. 10 minutes later, the glass doors parted with a hush, and a woman in a navy suit entered with the posture of someone who solves problems without raising her voice. She wore a simple lapel pin that no one recognized, but everyone respected in an instant. The manager straightened his tie so quickly it looked like a flinch. "Good morning," she said to the room, but her eyes went to the man first. They exchanged a nod, like colleagues who had built things no one in that lobby had ever seen. "I'm here to ensure our standards are met," she told the counter. "May I?" She stepped behind with the teller's invitation and reviewed the screen. Her gaze moved like a surveyor's level, calm, exact, uncompromising. The manager launched into a preemptive defense. "A simple confusion, I can explain." "No need," she said kindly, but in a way that closed all exits. "We'll address training. Today we address respect." She turned to the man. "Thank you for your patience." He smiled, the kind that reaches the eyes. "Patience is easier when the destination is clear." To the staff, she gave instructions that sounded like choreography. Open a private room, provide water, remove the spectacle from the lobby. Not because the man needed privacy to hide, but because the bank needed privacy to learn how not to perform. The security guard held the door with both hands. The manager followed, humbled and suddenly very aware of his own shoes. Inside the small conference room, sunlight painted a single rectangle across the table. The woman set down a leather folio. "We can proceed in 2 ways, she said to the man. "Quietly, as you prefer, and afterward I'll meet with the staff." "Quietly," he said. "Always quietly." He sat, not at the head of the table, but to the side, leaving the formal seat empty. A choice that said more about him than any biography could. Behind the closed door, the conversation was unremarkable in its tone and extraordinary in its content. The woman confirmed details in a measured rhythm. The teller, invited to observe, watched procedures she would tell her grandchildren about and never break confidentiality. The manager listened like a student who had discovered the real class started after office hours. The man unfolded the printed balance but didn't slide it across the table. "I don't need to prove anything," he said. "I need you to record what happened and why." "We will," the woman replied. "Documented, actionable. She didn't promise the moon. She promised a checklist. In adult life, that's how real change starts. Today isn't about me," he added. "It's about whoever walks in tomorrow looking like I did today." The manager found his voice. "Sir, it's not about your words," the man said gently. "It's about your reflexes." He glanced at the teller. Hers too. She had a choice at the edge of habit. She chose care. The teller's throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman in the navy suit closed the folio. "Oh, we're done here," she said. "We'll escort you out through the side to avoid further attention." He shook his head. "No need," he said, standing. "We'll go the way we came in." He offered a faint smile. "Let the room learn, quietly." They opened the door. The lobby looked up as one organism. Nothing was said, but everything had shifted by a few degrees, the way a compass settles after a disturbance. The man paused, just long enough to nod at the boy. The boy lit up as if he'd been handed a secret map. He stepped into the light of the lobby that had measured him and found itself wanting. The woman in the navy suit kept a respectful distance, present but not overshadowing. The manager stood at a diagonal, neither leading nor hiding, precise in the small choreography of humility. People parted without being asked. The contractor touched the brim of a cap he wasn't wearing. The woman in grey gave a tight, sincere nod. Even the security guard adjusted his stance from wall to sentinel. The man stopped at the counter and spoke softly to the teller. "You did well under pressure," he said. "Remember how that felt. Make it a habit." "I will," she said, and believed it. He turned to leave. The manager found himself stepping forward. "Sir," he began, and then paused, choosing the right noun for the first time all day. "Sir, thank you for letting this be a lesson." The man smiled. "Lessons are investments," he said. "This branch will earn interest if you keep paying attention." A few chuckles, gentle this time, not cruel, moved through the crowd. Kindness can be contagious when someone supplies the first dose. At the door, the boy called out, voice bright with a courage he would remember later in life. "Mister, are you a hero?" The man looked back. "No," he said. "Just someone who doesn't forget where he started." He pushed the door open. Sunlight met him like an old friend. Outside, the city continued in all its unglamorous beauty. Buses sighing, pigeons negotiating treaties, workers carrying the weight that builds everything. He blended into it easily, the way real power does, unannounced, steady, useful. Behind him, the bank was different now. Not fixed, but tilted toward better. It would take weeks of training, hours of uncomfortable meetings, and 100 small choices. But a new story had been installed in its walls, and stories are the software that buildings run on. He put his hands in his pockets and walked down the steps. Somewhere far above this branch, where decisions are made to be felt and not seen, a light had turned green. Outside, the sidewalk accepted him the way old friends do, without questions. A bus sighed at the curb. A florist's buckets clinked as she shifted stems in a shallow tub. He walked without hurry, passing the reflection of the bank's glass, where his worn jacket turned into a grey blur against chrome and light. He stopped at a small kiosk that sold newspapers and pens. The owner nodded, recognizing a regular who never gave a name and always paid in cash. He bought a cheap notebook and a plain pen. On the first page he wrote 3 lines, track training, anonymous survey for clients, quarterly dignity audit. He tore the page, folded it twice, and slipped it behind his ID in the wallet. Not a threat, a checklist. Quiet is the fastest way to move heavy things. A discreet ringtone buzzed in his pocket. He answered without breaking stride. "Yes," a woman's voice, calm, efficient. "Your request reached us." The liaison confirmed the branch protocols were followed after the escalation. "Do you want me to flag senior compliance?"
"Flag it," he said.
"No penalties." "Not yet." "Understood." A pause. Would you like the staff performance tied to training completion? Yes, make decency measurable. He ended the call and sat on a low stone wall near a tree that had learned to live in a square of soil the size of a suitcase. He watched a delivery rider adjust a strap, a nurse on her break open a packed lunch, a pair of construction workers share a joke that had traveled across 3 languages to arrive here intact. Wealth, he knew, was not a number. It was margin, room to fix what smaller rooms couldn't. A pigeon hopped close, daring, eye like a bead. He scattered a few crumbs from a pocket he kept for this purpose. The bird bobbed, satisfied by the world's simplest contract. He took out the notebook again and wrote 4 more lines. Scholarship fund for tellers. Anonymous bonus pool for unperformed kindness. Client storyboard in staff room, reminders of who walks in. He closed the book and smiled at its cheap cover as if it were leather. Tools don't need to look rich to build something that is. Across the street, the bank's reflection had forgotten how tall it felt an hour ago. Buildings are proud until people teach them manners. Back in the branch, the woman in the navy suit set 3 glasses of water on the small conference table and kept one for herself. The manager stood near the wall, pretending to blend with it. The teller sat, spine straight, as if a violin bow had been placed along it and gently tightened. "We're going to fix this," the woman said, voice even. "In public behavior and in private habit." She clicked a pen. "Step 1. We install a greeting standard that doesn't change based on shoes. Everyone gets the same baseline respect. Step 2. We prevent improvisational cruelty. No jokes, no wages, no commentary. Step 3. We create a fast escalation when a client seems vulnerable or intimidated, and we assume protection, not suspicion." The manager opened his mouth, then closed it, then tried again. I understand," he did to his surprise. Understanding felt like admitting he hadn't before. The teller raised a hand as if in school. "What about us? How do we build the muscle?" "Reps," the woman said. "Scenario drills. We'll run live role plays with observers who only watch for tone. Scripted apologies are banned. Real apologies are trained." The security guard knocked softly and leaned in. "Ma'am, the lobby's different," she nodded. "It will be for a while." She turned to the manager. "You will brief the team every morning for 30 days. Then once a week, 3 months from now, we test the culture, not the cash draws." He swallowed. "And if we fail?" "Then we start again," she said. "Until we don't." They stepped out. The lobby looked like a photograph just before the shutter clicks, poised, attentive. The woman addressed the staff in a tone that could cut fabric without tearing it. "We are not here to survive a PR storm," she said. "We are here to become the kind of place that never generates one." 2 tellers glanced at each other, a mixture of relief and fear passing like a baton. The contractor in line lifted a thumb. The woman in gray put her phone away for good. The boy squeezed both hands into fists of excitement beside his knees, as if he had just watched a magic trick and wanted to keep the secret in his pockets. When the staff dispersed, the manager lingered. "Do you know who he is?" he asked. The woman's eyes softened. "I know what he is," she said. "A mirror." A city bench doesn't ask questions. He sat, elbows on knees, the cheap notebook balanced on his thigh. He wrote another line. "Names are for uniforms. Work is for hands." A memory rose, with the same reliable timing as the noon traffic. A younger version of himself, standing in the back of a different bank, holding a mop. He had been 19, wearing a badge with a name his supervisor mispronounced for 6 months. He'd learned the rhythm of the place by sound, how the printer chatter changed when someone printed a withdrawal too large for comfort, how the laughter at the manager's desk thickened when a client's clothes didn't match the carpet. He learned a lot holding that mop, how quickly people paint others with the color of their worst day, how value gets confused with volume, how dignity is lost in the half-second between a sigh and an eye roll. On break, he would sit with his sandwich in a storage room that smelled like copy paper and lemon cleaner, and he would read. Not motivation books, manuals, policy, the language of how things were supposed to be. If you know how it's supposed to be, he discovered, you can tell when it's wrong, and you can fix it without having to scream. He folded the memory like a receipt and put it back where it belonged. Today was not a victory lap. It was Tuesday. People still had rent to pay and medicine to buy. He looked at his watch, the scratched face catching a thin bar of sun. Another buzz in his pocket. A text, board review moved up. Branch culture audit, attendance requested. He texted back, I'll be there. He stood, the bench giving up his shape without protest. On the curb, a rideshare slowed. He raised a hand, then lowered it. He preferred walking. Good ideas keep pace better at 4 miles an hour. He passed a school where kids shouted at the sky with the confidence of people who still believed clouds were listening. He wrote a last line before tucking the notebook away. We're not correcting a bank. We're widening a doorway. He turned the corner and nearly collided with the boy from the lobby and his mother standing by a bus stop. The boy's eyes lit up, surprise cracking into a smile. The mother reached for his shoulder. Don't bother the gentleman, she said, uncertain whether to bow or apologize. It's no bother, he said. We've already shared a room. The boy looked at the worn jacket, then back at the man's face. Are you important? He asked, using the word kids use for people who move the air around them. He considered. Sometimes, he said, but not in the way you think. In the bank, the boy said, you didn't yell. My coach says yelling is how you win. Your coach is right for games, he replied. This was not a game. The mother smiled despite herself. He's saving for a bicycle, she said. We came to deposit the coins. He wanted to watch the machine count. A good habit, the man said. He took the cheap notebook from his pocket and tore a page carefully along the perforation. He wrote a name, one that meant nothing to most, except that it opened quiet doors. He added a phone number and one sentence. Ask about the savings match for young savers. He folded it once and handed it to the mother. If anyone asks where you got it, he said, tell them a man on a bench likes bicycles. The mother read the note, eyes flicking to his face with a mixture of gratitude and caution. We can't accept. It's not money, he said. It's a policy you're already eligible for. Sometimes the door sticks. This helps it open. The bus roared up, brakes exhaling. The boy hesitated. If you were important, he asked, would you tell people? He smiled. I would tell the right people the right things, and I would let the rest find out when it helps them more than it helps me. The boy nodded, satisfied. Secrets and bicycles share a logic when you're 8. Balance and trust. The doors folded open. The mother tucked the note into her wallet like a small passport. Thank you, she said. Buy a helmet first, he replied. The boy saluted with 2 fingers, then bounded up the steps. When the bus pulled away, he saw his reflection in the window, a blur again, and felt a familiar peace. Disguise wasn't hiding. It was choosing which truths to spend in public. Near dusk, the headquarters building absorbed the last of the day like a tall glass catching the final pour. He entered through a side door that required no ceremony, nodded to a receptionist who pretended not to know him and did it perfectly. An elevator hummed him up to a floor where carpets softened footsteps and glass walls turned the sky into furniture. In the small boardroom that looked outward rather than inward, a handful of people waited. Legal, compliance, operations. The woman in the navy suit was there, her folio now a stack of bullet points. She gave him a look that said the work had already started. Thank you for coming, the compliance lead said. No titles, no honorifics. That's how they did it here when the aim was clarity. He sat not at the head. He never did. Let's keep it simple, he said. What happened, why it happened, what prevents it next time. They moved fast, slide decks without decoration, facts without theater. The branch had a culture gap that training alone wouldn't fill. Incentives needed to be rewired. Customer experience had to be measured by more than speed and sales. A pilot program was proposed. 3 branches, 90 days, dignity metrics tied to bonuses, anonymous client feedback with real teeth. Approved, he said. Add a component for staff stories, moments they're proud of that have nothing to do with selling a product. Reward those. Operations nodded, scribbling. Legal asked about risk exposure. He waved it off. The risk is who we become if we ignore this. A young analyst cleared her throat. "There's one more item," she said, cheeks coloring. "The branch manager requested to apologize directly," he considered. "Not to me," he said. "To his team first, then to the clients in the lobby tomorrow morning. Put it on the calendar as a service reset and make sure it doesn't become a performance. Keep the cameras out." The woman in the navy suit met his eyes. "And you?" "I'll be there," he said, "in line, like anyone else." They ended the meeting without applause. Real progress is allergic to showmanship. As he left, the receptionist gave him a small conspiratorial nod, like a street musician, acknowledging another who knew the tempo. He stepped back into the evening. The city had switched on its necklace of lights. Somewhere 3 floors down, a maintenance worker propped open a door with a bucket and let the night air in. He paused to hold it for him. The worker smiled, surprised, and said thanks in a language the building didn't understand and didn't need to. On the sidewalk, he took out the notebook and wrote one last line for the day. "Tomorrow, we rehearse who we say we are." Morning arrived with the authority of routine. The sidewalk coffee carts steamed. The first commuters ran for the crosswalk. The bank's lights blinked awake, as if remembering their lines. He came on foot, same worn jacket, same quiet posture, and took his place in line behind a nurse, clutching a reusable cup, and a delivery driver counting the minutes on his phone. He offered a small smile to the security guard, who nodded back with a respect learned in one long afternoon. Inside, the branch felt like a room that had opened the windows. The air carried less performance and more listening. At the center of the lobby, near the braided ropes that suggested order, the manager stood in a neutral suit with both hands visible, as if he were approaching a skittish animal. "Trust." "Carefully, good morning," he said, not to the room but to the line. "Before we begin today, I owe you something." No microphone, no camera, just voice, steady, unornamented. "Yesterday I behaved in a way that betrayed what this place is supposed to be. I confused polish with worth. I made a joke at the expense of someone whose dignity does not depend on my approval. I'm sorry." No one clapped. The apology wasn't written for applause. It landed with the weight of a stone, placed where it should have been all along. He continued, "We are changing how we greet, how we escalate, how we correct. You will see it, and you are invited to hold us to it." He gestured to a small stand at the side with neatly printed cards. "There are anonymous feedback forms. They go directly to compliance, not to me. If you are treated with anything less than respect, tell us. If you see a kindness that matters, tell us that too. We will pay attention to both." A murmur moved through the line, not skepticism, not yet belief, but the sound people make when they consider the possibility of a better habit. The woman in the grey blazer from the day before stood at the back, arms loose at her sides, phone in her bag. She was trying something new, letting experience arrive before opinion. He reached the counter, nodded to the teller, now wearing a name tag with just her first name, big enough to read without squinting. "Good morning," she said, voice warm. "How can we help you today?" "I'd like to make a small deposit," he said, placing a plain envelope on the counter. The manager, stationed a respectful distance away, stared at a spot on the floor as if humility required him to study the geometry of tiles. The teller opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. She read it, blinked, read it again. Her eyes flicked to him with a question that was also gratitude. "What is it?" The manager asked reflexively, then caught himself and waited to be invited. The teller looked at the paper, then at the lobby. "It's a matching program," she said carefully. "For youth savings. It triples deposits up to a small monthly cap when made by minors or on their behalf. It starts today." She swallowed. "It's funded." A boy and his mother entered at that moment, as if the script had been written by a benevolent hand. The boy saw him first. "The bicycle man," he whispered, tugging his mother's sleeve. The mother covered her smile with her hand, failing to hide it. The manager stepped forward. "Who authorized?" He stopped. He didn't say the rest. He didn't have to. "Policy lives in the same building as money," the man said softly, "for the room. Sometimes it just needs help finding the elevator." The teller placed a stack of the new program flyers on the counter. The top one bore a simple title, "Start Small, Grow Steady." Below it, in small print, was a sentence that read like a promise. Every coin deserves a chance to become a story. He made his deposit, an amount so ordinary it vanished into the day, and stepped aside. The nurse advanced. The delivery driver adjusted his cap. The boy clutched his jar of coins with both hands, like a rare treasure newly recognized by the world. The lobby resumed its rhythm, but now the rhythm had a melody. He left the branch and walked 3 blocks to a community center where the gym smelled like varnish and last night's basketball, and the hallway bulletin boards overflowed with flyers for tutoring and blood drives and a Saturday chess club. He liked places where ideas wore work boots. The center director, a woman with silver hair braided into a crown, met him with the kind of hug that is also a handshake for people who dislike fuss. "You're early," she said. "Good habits are just late arrivals that learned punctuality," he answered. It was an old joke between them. They sat in a small office where the chairs didn't match because they didn't need to. He slid another page from the cheap notebook across the desk. "Pilot program," he said. "Micro grants for first jobs. Small stipends to cover the gap between wanting to work and being able to afford to start. Bus passes, steel toe boots, first month childcare." She scanned the page, nodding in time with her pulse. "We've been triaging this with bake sales and prayers," she said. "You're proposing a pipeline." "A quiet one," he said. "No banners. People should remember where they worked, not who funded the bus pass." Her eyes softened. "You still won't let me say your name at the annual dinner, will you?" "That dinner isn't about me," he said. "Say the names that needed the bus pass." She laughed, a sound like warm gravel. "One day they'll figure you out," she teased. "They already have," he said. "The ones who needed to." A volunteer stuck his head in the door. "The chess kids are asking if the benchman is coming today," he said. "Tell them the benchman likes checkmates he doesn't have to announce," the director replied, and the volunteer disappeared. Amused, they spent the next hour translating the notebook into logistics, which suppliers would honor vouchers, which bus lines a pass should cover, how to measure success in ways that felt like lives lived, not charts drawn. He preferred metrics that could survive a kitchen table conversation. Before he left, she opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of thank you notes written in child handwriting, the kind with capital letters arguing over who gets to stand tallest. "These are for the scholarship envelopes you sent last winter," she said. "We read them out loud sometimes when the copier jams." He leafed through a few, dinosaurs sketched in the margins, a soccer ball that looked like a lunar map, a careful sentence from a girl who had learned English by reading menus. "I will become the nurse who lets people breathe." He placed the stack back with a reverence that did not require ceremony. "Do you ever worry you're doing the bank's job for them?" she asked. "I am teaching them how to recognize their job," he said. "Correction is a form of mentorship." They walked the hallway together. In the gym, a volunteer coach shouted encouragement that rode the echo like a small boat. In a side room, a retired accountant showed 3 teenagers how interest works, using jars and beans and laughter. "Spreadsheets are just polite jars," the accountant said. At the front door, a parent held up a flyer. "Is this real?" she asked. "First job stipends." "It will be by Friday," the director said. "Bring your bus pass receipts. Bring your courage." On the steps, the city's afternoon leaned into its own shoulders. He watched 2 men argue over nothing and end with a handshake that meant everything. He adjusted his sleeve. The disguise felt less like a mask and more like a uniform chosen for a long shift. That afternoon, a rumor tried to outrun him and lost. Someone in the branch texted someone in another office, who texted a cousin who worked in the cafeteria at headquarters, who told a friend who wrote a blog that specialized in banking gossip. A post went up with just enough facts to be wrong in convincing ways. A mysterious high-net-worth client had humiliated a local manager. Punitive measures were coming. Heads would roll. The piece used the word billionaire like seasoning, enough to make the stew smell expensive without nourishing the truth. His phone lit with messages he ignored. Fame, he had learned, is an offer sheet from a store that never closes and sells one product: distraction. He put the phone face down on the table and made tea. The woman in the navy suit called. He answered. "I saw it," she said. "Do you want us to issue a correction?" "No," he said. "Let it tire itself out. There's a request for comment," she added. "From a major outlet this time." "Decline," he said. "If we turn this into a story about a person, we lose the story about a place." Silence, then a small sigh. Understood. He walked to the window and watched a delivery truck try, politely, to become smaller than physics would allow on a narrow street. A passerby guided the driver with patient hand signals that worked better than horns. Cities survive on people who decide hourly not to choose chaos. Another message arrived. This one he read. It was from a board member whose texts never wasted a breath. "We need to show leadership. A statement would be prudent." He replied, "Leadership is the statement we make tomorrow morning at the branch. Come see it before we caption it." He turned back to the kettle. Steam threaded the air. He poured into a chipped mug he'd refused to retire because it fit his hand like good advice. He sat, closed his eyes, and let the quiet reassemble him. Solitude wasn't a luxury for him. It was his factory floor. When he opened his eyes, the phone lit again. A short video clip, shaky and vertical, posted by someone in line that morning, the manager apologizing. The flyers. The boy with the coin jar grinning. The caption read, "Felt different in here today." No hashtags, no call to subscribe. Just a testimony from someone with nothing to sell. By evening, the blog post had spawned commentary that mistook volume for truth. A pundit in a studio said the word optics 10 times in 3 minutes. An anonymous account posted a thread that read like a conspiracy theory, assembled from burnt toast. A stranger tagged him under a photo that was not him, in a city he did not live in, outside a restaurant he could not afford even if he had cared to try. He turned the phone face down again. Let the performance tire itself out. The woman in the navy suit texted a screenshot of the staff schedule, role plays, debriefs, a note that simply read, "Tone, speed." He replied with a thumbs up and then sent a correction. 2 words he loved because they got to the point faster than policy memos. Good work. On a walk after dinner, he overheard 2 teenagers on scooters discussing the video. "He was probably famous," one said. "Nah," the other answered. "He was probably just important." The difference pleased him. At home, he opened the notebook and added a page titled "Public Noise, Private Work." Under it, he wrote 3 lines. Answer when it helps the work. Ignore when it feeds the echo. Never confuse the two. Then he closed the book and let the room return to the sound of the building breathing. By the next morning, the bank had a new habit. People arrived suspicious and left confused by the absence of reasons to stay angry. The manager met each client at eye level and practiced a listening face that eventually became his real one. The teller's smile learned to rest, so it didn't look like it hurt. The security guard became very good at holding doors for people whose hands were full of things that did not fit. Through rope lanes, he entered through the same glass, doors at mid-morning, and took his place at the end of the line again. Today no one stared, not because he was invisible, but because dignity had become common enough not to be gossip. The woman in the grey blazer waved. The contractor raised a chin. The boy, now helmeted, pressed his nose to the glass on his way past. Leaving a clean arc, he tried and failed to wipe away. At the counter, an elderly man with a hat, the color of old walnut, struggled to understand a new debit card. The teller slowed her speech without making her voice louder. "Let's do it together," she said, and the manager brought a chair without being asked. The bank moved at 2 speeds at once, fast for those who needed fast, careful for those who needed careful, and no one complained because the wait felt like fairness, not neglect. He stepped out of line to let a woman with a crying baby go ahead. The baby hiccuped itself into silence against her shoulder. "Thank you," she mouthed. He tipped 2 fingers in a gesture that belonged equally to bus stops and boardrooms. When his turn came, he asked for nothing special. Another small deposit, another ordinary transaction. The teller printed his receipt. On the bottom, in small type, a new line had been added since yesterday. If we failed to treat you with respect, tell us how to fix it. Next to it, a QR code pointed to a form that looked like it had been designed by someone who had once been asked for feedback and meant it. On his way out, the manager intercepted him with a careful distance. "We've scheduled the role plays," he said. "The team volunteered extra sessions." "Not all of them. Enough. Enough is where better begins," he said. The manager looked at the floor, then at him. "I was raised to think respect is a currency you spend only on people who can pay you back," he confessed. "I am relearning math." "Good," he said. "The new math scales." Outside, a light rain began, a clean slate written in droplets. He stood under the awning and watched people renegotiate the city with umbrellas and shared sprints. A woman held her bag over a stranger's stroller. 2 teens laughed as they failed to leap the same puddle. The rain made everyone briefly equal in foolishness and kindness. When he reached the door, an elderly woman stopped him with a hand that trembled but did not shake. "I used to teach here," she said, tapping the floor with her cane as if striking a tuning fork. "Not here in the bank, here in this neighborhood. I taught the manager his multiplication tables. He cheated once and then cried because he hated who that made him." She smiled. "People aren't fixed. They are stories in pencil. He listened the way you listen to a song you haven't heard in years, but somehow still know the chorus." "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," she replied. "Bring me a chair next time you see me standing." "That's how you thank teachers," he promised and meant it. Outside, the rain relaxed into a mist that made the city look like it had decided to pose for a portrait. He took a long breath that tasted like metal and bread, then stepped into the weather without flinching. A man offered him half an umbrella. He declined and gave the man his hat instead. The man laughed and wore it wrong with delight. That afternoon he received a call that asked for no explanation and granted no time to prepare. "We're downstairs," the voice said, a tone he associated with doors that open into rooms where nothing spills. He checked his watch, said he'd be there, and walked to a service entrance the public never used. A security camera blinked once in recognition. The door released. The room was plain on purpose, a table, 4 chairs, a screen. 3 people waited, legal, operations, the board member who had texted him yesterday. They rose, and then remembered he hated that and sat back down, embarrassed as children caught polishing an apple with the wrong sleeve. "We reviewed the pilot," operations said. "The branch's early data is not just promising. It's unusual. Complaints down 60%. Transaction time unchanged. Staff self-reports mention pride more than goals." "Good," he said. "Pride that counts other people is the only useful kind." The board member cleared his throat. "There is another matter," he said. "You know we have our annual meeting next week. There's a motion to honor significant contributions to culture change. The members intend to name you." He smiled the way one does when a dog brings back a shoe you didn't throw. "Decline it," he said. "We expected that," legal said, almost relieved. "But the motion will leak. It's better if you supply a narrative than if we let speculation write it." "Supply this," he said. "You changed policy because a branch showed you a mirror. Honor the branch. Honor the staff who chose better when better got heavy." The board member looked at his hands. "We also need to clarify your role for internal records," he said carefully. "There's an appetite for titles." "Titles are coats," he said. "I prefer weather." He let the silence hold long enough for the joke to land softly. Then he nodded. "If compliance must print something, print this. Advisor at large. It means nothing and everything." They laughed, grateful to have a phrase that would stop questions without starting a mythology. As he stood to leave, operations handed him a single-page printout. Thin text, crisp margins. "The youth savings program you suggested," she said. "We'd like to scale it, quietly, 10 districts. Same rules." He read the page, then folded it back to her. "Add an asterisk," he said. "For every account that meets its goal. We fund a library card drive in that zip code. Savings grow better when stories do. She wrote it down. He was halfway to the door when the board member spoke again, voice uncertain. "Do you mind," he asked, "if I ask the obvious question?" He turned, eyebrows lifting in permission. "Why the jacket?" The board member asked. "Why the routine? You could helicopter everywhere behind tinted glass. It would be easier. It would be smaller," he said. "Glass turns cities into aquariums. I prefer the ocean." At dusk, he walked home the long way, through streets that smelled like wet concrete and fried onions, and the kind of soap only laundromats know. He passed the bench where he'd fed the pigeon, and found the same bird offering him the same bargain, crumbs for a nod at eternity. He paid, grateful for consistent partners. At his building, he took the stairs. Elevators are honest about height. Stairs are honest about effort. On the landing between floors, he paused at a window that framed a slice of the city like a painting chosen by a curator with a sense of humor. A billboard for a luxury brand reflected in a puddle where a kid sailed a paper boat. He smiled. One day the kid would own something larger than a billboard, the habit of putting boats into water other people had written off. Inside his small apartment, he hung the jacket on the same hook he always used. The room was neat without being precious, books on a shelf, a kettle on the stove, a plant that refused to die out of spite and sunlight. He boiled water, rinsed the mug, and sat at the kitchen table that had hosted spreadsheets and grocery lists with equal seriousness. He opened the notebook and wrote the final lines for the week. Hire from the neighborhood. Trust is hyperlocal. Design forms people with trembling hands can fill. Teach managers to measure tone like balance. Start every meeting with a story of a time we were wrong and fixed it. He underlined the last line twice. Being wrong wasn't a scandal in his book. Refusing to repair was. His phone buzzed on the table. A text from the woman in the navy suit. Tomorrow's schedule set. Branch audit plan attached. Staff asked if you'll attend the first role play. He replied, "I'll be the customer who forgets his PIN and doesn't want to admit it. Make them good enough to catch me gently." She responded with a single check mark, a punctuation they'd invented that meant, "We'll do it right, not loud." He poured tea and stepped onto the fire escape, where cities learn to breathe between metal ribs. Below, a neighbor played a guitar out of tune with conviction, which is one of the better ways to get in tune. Someone laughed on the sidewalk. A siren passed and then changed its mind. The sky held the last light, like someone reluctant to leave a good conversation. He thought about the boy's question, "Are you a hero?" and let it drift into the air where other questions live, rent-free, until they earn their keep. He didn't want a statue. Statues forget how to walk. He wanted branches that learned how to hold a door open without checking shoes. He raised the mug in a private toast to no one that was also to everyone. "To the people who do the math right," he said quietly. "To the clerks who choose care. To the managers who learn a new reflex. To the buildings that remember why they were built." On his table inside, the receipt from the day's small deposit lay beside the notebook. At the bottom, the new line with the QR code glinted in the lamplight. He picked it up, turned it over, and wrote on the back, "What do you think?" Share your thoughts and subscribe for more stories like this. He smiled at the habit he pretended not to have. Good stories always leave a door open. And just like that, the story ended not with noise, but with quiet change. But you, yes, you listening, this is where the story continues. Have you ever seen a moment where dignity turned the ordinary into something unforgettable? Tell us in the comments. Let us know from where in the world you are watching, because your story matters too. And don't forget, subscribe now so you won't miss the next story that reminds us what truly matters. He set the receipt back down and let the room find its evening shape. In the distance, a train announced itself with a low, certain note. He felt tired in the satisfying way that meant the day had been a lever, not a ladder. Tomorrow would be more of the same, which is what revolutions look like when they intend to last. Small choices, repeated, until buildings learn new manners and people remember old truths. Disguises would still be useful, because there is work best done when no one thinks to photograph it. But the city was already different by a few millimeters, and millimeters given time move bridges. He closed the notebook. The plant by the window leaned toward the last light, as if it knew where growth lived. He did too. He washed the mug, turned out the lamp, and let the quiet do what it does when given the chance: multiply.